Welcome back to the show. Well, the Bytown Museum may not be available for you to visit in person just yet, but you can visit them virtually. They have a fantastic series of talks that are going on. And here to tell us more about it, I'm joined by Steve Mattiussi. He is the manager of visitor experience at the Bytown Museum. Steve, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. How are things at the Bytown Museum these days?
Oh, not too bad. We're doing the best we can without having in-person visitation, but I think we got some great virtual programming on offer.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Tell me a little bit about this virtual talk series that you have called Beyond Bytown.
Yeah, so the Beyond Bytown Virtual Talk series has given us a chance to work with tons of community groups and individuals in Ottawa to talk about parts of Ottawa's history that don't normally get covered in museums like this one. And it's an hour on a Wednesday evening every month, and we've had some great talks over the course of the last year, since January, really.
Let's talk about what you've got coming up. We know Remembrance Day, of course, coming up, and I know you have a talk on that. Tell me a little bit more about that virtual talk.
Yeah, so next Wednesday, on November 3rd from 7 to 8, we have our next installment of Beyond Bytown. We have Stacey Barker coming as a guest speaker. She's an historian from the Canadian War Museum, and she's going to be presenting The Traces They Left Behind. It's basically stories and tales of Canadian women in war. And, you know, it's meant to really center Canadian women in the stories of war and remembrance, something that's, I think, typically considered sort of a man's world.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to the stories that Stacey's going to share with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, often forgotten how much work was put in behind the scenes, you know, from so many women from, I mean, virtually, not just here in Canada, but many women from around the world. What other programs do you have coming up? What other talks do you have coming up, Steve?
So we actually just finished one with the Embassy of Hungary on the story of the Revolution of 1956. We're looking at potentially having some roundtables in the future regarding Indigenous issues in the area relating to museums. But you know, really for now, we're really looking forward to this talk next week with Stacey. It's a great way to commemorate Remembrance Day, and we have quite a bit in the museum here about people from Ottawa in the First World War and the South African War. So we're still thinking up some ideas for talks in the future, but we're really looking forward to this one coming up.
You mentioned the First World War. Tell me a little bit more, because there's, you know, a lot of content within that museum around that. What sort of content from the First World War?
Yeah, so we have both a treasure trove of artifacts and just stories from people, specifically Ottawans, who participated in the conflicts that Canada fought in the past. Just behind me in this part of the exhibit, we have some examples of stories of women from Ottawa who were nurses during the South African and First World Wars, people like Marjorie Cook and Margaret Smith and Margaret Stewart. And these are stories of women who volunteered to serve, who maybe weren't even professionally trained as nurses. They got a few lessons in first aid, and then they were sent overseas during the wars and built up their careers from there. There's also stories of women in Ottawa and across Canada serving in munitions factories while men were across the seas fighting. So it's just a very wide range of stories and tales that can help us remember the sacrifices that so many Canadians gave for our country.
Steve, when it comes to the virtual talks, I imagine, you know, to keep people's attention, you know, for viewers, you probably bring in some of this content, you know, in photographs and some of the content that you have there at the museum. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever possible, we like to share our own artifacts, our own photos in our collection. We have quite a decent collection here at the Bytown Museum. And the good thing about these virtual talks, though, is that we get to share as a museum our collection. We also get to bring in, again, community groups and individuals from across the city who have artifacts and have photos and have stories of histories that, again, don't often get the time of day that they might deserve. So it's been a great mix of our own museum, partnering with other organizations, and just sharing as much about the history of the city as we absolutely can.
Steve, is this something that people need to pre-register for?
Yes, they certainly do. They can head to bytownmuseum.com and register for free.
Excellent. Steve, really appreciate you spending time with us, and I know you and your team, you can't wait to open back up and have people in person there as well. So looking forward to that, and congratulations, though, on this virtual talk series, and just incredibly successful so far.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Hey, don't go anywhere. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Greg Jodoin. He is part of PACE, which is working on a police engagement report when it comes to racialized communities here in the Ottawa area. We'll find out about that report and more right after this.